For me, Paradise Pier is a classic RollerCoaster Tycoon scenario. Maybe because it's from the original game, maybe because it's got a sequel in loopy landscapes, or maybe just because it's one I found frustrating as a younger gamer playing in the noughties. In RollerCoaster Tycoon Classic, it's the final scenario of the Emerald Group, and I believe it's known as Big Pier to players in America. It's a unique park because there is no dry land, and you don't actually own any land, just construction rights around the pre-existing path network. It's a small park, but with land stretching only a few squares beyond the existing pathways. And you'll begin with an empty park. This one will be a test of tight construction and making the most of the land available, but only 600 guests are required, although just 2 years are permitted to get there in this scenario. Looking at what is available in the build menu, it's clear we will need to prioritise research of new rides with maximum funding, and you may want to limit the research categories too. Space will need to be used wisely in this scenario, and I've decided to use the outer parts of the front and back of the park for static rides, using the central squares and the 2 longer sides for tracked rides. To get the park open and earning me some revenue quickly, I'll get up some rides straight away. A merry-go-round, twist, and a Ferris wheel. I won't be able to use any of the pre-built coasters in this tight space unless I delete the inner paths, but even then I'm not sure the pre-built rides will be the best use of my available space for this scenario. Therefore, I'll get a quick and simple narrow junior coaster built so I can have a coaster operating early on. I've built my entrance and exit paths straight away to ensure I don't cause myself a problem later. The coaster will be built around the path rather than trying to find a path route later on, which may prove tricky. After that, a simple design with some drops, turns and helixes can be kept short with a junior coaster by allowing a 2-lap ride of the track for guests. This really is all about building something quick and efficient for the park. Here's a test ride. Decent stats for this one, good enough for a first coaster in a tight space which I believe I have built quite efficiently. So after adding some benches, let's open the park and the 4 rides I already have. My next ride will be a log flume which I will try and keep within 1 quadrant, spilling out slightly around the junior coaster. I've got several drops as well as proximity to other rides, to the water and the pathways, so I'm not surprised to see this rate above 5 for excitement, even with its small design and lack of scenery. With the park operating well, I want a major coaster. A looping coaster would be a great idea as a short reverse inclined or powered launch coaster in Paradise Pier, but I actually want something a bit more than that, and I'm confident I can construct a decent coaster in this long space to the right side of the park with a powered launch, enabling me to remove the need for a chain lift hill. So let's test it out. Decent stats for a short coaster, and I'm sure this will be a popular ride that will give my guest count a nice boost as well. With only 2 years to reach the goal, I won't stop building, and I have space and budget available to add a 3rd coaster. Wooden Wild Mice rides with their steep lift hills and tight turns are a great option when space is limited, as it is in Paradise Pier, or Big Pier if you're watching in America. This type of coaster will easily fit into 1 quadrant of the park. I'll just need to be careful not to take those tight turns at too high a speed, otherwise my intensity may be too much for the guests who want to ride this coaster. This is a fairly typical Wild Mouse design with big dips and peaks, and track built tightly alongside itself rather than going on a sprawling ride across the park. So let's see how it tests out. Much higher intensity and higher excitement than the other coasters in this park, but I'm happy with that for the balance of the park and to offer something for guests with higher intensity thresholds. Plus, with those stats, I can charge a higher ticket fee. There's also some extra space in this quadrant which I can use for some of the static rides which have become available through research. So I'll start with a spiral slide. Information kiosk is now available, so of course that gets built. And I want to build a dinghy slide too. Happy with my coaster options and the guest count climbing, I'll send this across 2 quadrants while leaving some room for another long ride next to it. We'll start with a large drop and then a winding track before a lift hill takes riders back to the station. Here's the test run. And like the log flume, that returns pretty good stats for a water ride without any scenery. As I head into the final year, I'll add a mini coaster next to the dinghy slide, and given the limited space available, this will be my last major custom build. I'll start with an elevated station and then climb out high over the looping coaster, before turning back to drop into the remaining space inside the park. After interrupting construction to add the entrance and exit paths, just like with the earlier junior coaster, I've done this to avoid restricting my space once the track is complete. I can now also use those paths as obstacles the track drops under and climbs over, which will enhance the excitement rating for this ride. There was a bit of trial and error with this build, and I'm not entirely convinced by it, but let's test it out. Okay, those are better stats than I maybe thought I would get. Great, let's open this ride. Continuing my policy of keeping building, I added a submarine ride next. This is a great option in this park as its underground nature means it uses really limited space, especially if it's below an elevated coaster like the looping one. As I entered Year 2, dodgems became available, so they can use the vacant space close to the wooden wild mouse. By now, most of my space is taken, and I'm already just above the 600 guest target. There is still space across the back of the park though, so I can fill that with a pirate ship, motion simulator, and then a 3D cinema. And as I approach August, I also approach 800 guests. And so, with space basically full and my park also brimming with guests, I can fast forward to October. I'm really pleased with the outcome of this park this time around. There are plenty of rides, I've made good use of space, and I managed to build a few more roller coasters than I probably thought possible when I played this scenario in the past.